I now call to order the regular scheduled meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Notice of this meeting, the time, the date, the place, and the agenda was published in the Aiken Standard on May 7th, 2019 as a legal notice. Notice to contiguous property owners and signs were posted on the properties on or before May 8th, 2018. Notice of this meeting was sent on May 24th, 2019 for posting on the city webpage and to the city clerk for posting on the Finance Administration Notice Board and the Municipal Building Notice Board 24 hours before this meeting. Agenda sheets were mailed or emailed to interested parties. Now, as a reminder, it is unlawful for any person giving testimony to this board knowingly providing false information. That's according to Section 22-9 of the Aiken Municipal Code. Each infraction is a separate offense with a penalty or fine up to 30 days in jail and or a fine of $1,092.50. Any person that wishes to address the board, we ask that you occupy the podium in front of us. Please speak clearly so that your conversation with the board can be duly recorded. Anyone that wishes copies of the day's proceeding, we ask that you either sign up on the sign-up sheet just beyond the double doors and or call the planning department and ask for minutes of this meeting or copies of this meeting to be sent to you. Please state your name and your address. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Chair for the minutes of the last meeting. Judy?
Okay. We have the minutes of the last meeting. Do we have any corrections or deletions?
Madam Vice Chair, I move that they be approved as written.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, they're approved.
And we have the final orders.
Mr. Chairman, we do. We have two orders with a label for you specifically left over from 2 meetings ago, and then orders for the rest of the group for last month's meeting.
Okay, thank you. The final orders is the old business. We move directly into new business. The first item, application 19-92006. It has been continued to the fall. I understand that the applicant is making legal consultations based on comments and is out of town.
Both of those cases, that's correct.
Both of those cases, thank you.
That's my understanding.
I call your attention to application 19-9.
Have to
Yes, sir.
approve it to be
Continue.
Let's see, yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to probably get a specific date to continue this from the board. Given no other direction, I guess fall technically begins at the end of September, so I guess that would be the earliest in the legal sense that you could continue it to.
Thank you. The chair will now consider a motion for the continuance of the application.
I so move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Bud, second. It's been properly moved and second. Do we have any discussion? Those in favor of the motion show by raising the right hand.
And just for clarification, that is for September?
September,
All
thank you, the fall. The motion is approved unanimously. Now, I call your attention to application 19-90001. That's a petition, an appeal of an administrative decision for an electronic sign, and that's accordance with Section 4.4.5 of the Aiken zoning ordinance. And that's for property at 113 Lawrence Street to the city. Has this been properly posted?
It has.
Any inquiries that you wish to share with the board?
No inquiries.
Thank you. Discussion, presentation?
Yeah, so one of the things that the board hears, typically you hear variances and special exceptions, but you can also hear administrative appeals, which means a challenge to the way that staff is interpreting the code, and that's what this is. What is in question, I'll call it a display or a sign. You have a picture here in front of you. It essentially is along Lawrence Street, you have an interactive television screen, so to speak, or the digital display that is close enough to the window that you can interact with it. You can actually touch things on there, and it changes the display based on what your selection. And then on the exterior of the window, it is framed by a vinyl sign, kind of similar to you see around downtown. So this was brought to our attention, it would have been the week before Masters, so it had been late March, very late March, and staff followed up and essentially kind of went through the criteria in the code to try to determine whether this was a sign, wasn't a sign, was an electronic sign, and what we used in the code are a few sections. One is at the beginning of the sign ordinance in section 4.441, it states that the regulations of this article shall apply only to signs visible from any point on a street right-of-way in all zoning districts. So in our sense, it was visible from a right-of-way. Second is, does it meet the definition of a sign? So in our code, the sign in chapter 10 is defined as any sign, poster, panel, freestanding sign, monument sign, projecting sign, pylon sign, illuminated sign, sign painted on a wall, window marquee, awning, or canopy, and shall include any announcement, declaration, demonstration, display, ribbon, banner, illustration, or insignia used to advertise or promote the interests of any person, business, or entity, public or private, when the same is placed in view of the general public traveling along a public street right-of-way. Okay, so in that case, most signs in the windows, specifically like downtown and other districts, we treat them like wall signs. Wall signs meaning any sign on the face of a building. So in the code, section 446A1 says that signs on the front surface of a building, the total area of signs on the exterior front surface of building shall not exceed 20% of that surface. So in a lot of cases, if a sign is having to be installed on the exterior of a structure, those require a sign permit. Most of the window decals don't. So we generally try to tell what the percentage is, just kind of, by some basic proportions of the front of a building. So they're a little more difficult, but we do regulate them. In the downtown area, they require a certificate of appropriateness from the design review board. In other cases, we just kind of look at them on a case-by-case basis based on whether they can be seen from a right-of-way and whether they kind of meet our definition of a sign. So in those sense, if it is a sign and it is it falls under those regulations and falls under a wall sign, if those are all true, in 4.4.5.2, and this is kind of where aside from all those, it would be a legal sign. It had not gone through the certificate of appropriateness process through the design review board, but in all intents and purposes, if we were considered the window decal, like, if it were a full window decal, it would be consistent with the zoning ordinance. It says, though, in 4452, and this is a fairly recent amendment, this was in 2014 when the electronic reader board section was inserted into the ordinance to allow you to use an electronic reader board in place of a manual reader board in some zone districts. Manual reader board meaning I'm switching out letters by hand, essentially. And it says in that section, though, that electronic signs except reader boards, electronic signs shall not be permitted except as a reader board on a freestanding sign pursuant to 447E. And that's the section that talks about the reader boards, what percentage of a monument sign it can be, auto dimming feature, those sorts of things. So that's what that references to, that 447E. So as staff went through kind of all these, it essentially kind of came down to obviously, at some point, it becomes a window display if it is inset into, into the building. But at the same time, with our definition of a sign, even inset into the building to some extent, it seems like it could be generated in such a way that it's still directed out as a sign. And so staff kind of wrestled with that, but the fact that you could actually interact with it by, the monitor was close enough to the window that you could interact with it, we conservatively defined it as a sign and felt that it met the definition of an electronic sign. So that is kind of the stages of evaluating our sign code and our zoning ordinance that we looked at when we were trying to determine whether this one met the definition of a sign as regulated by our code and whether it would be an electronic sign and then therefore prohibited.
In accordance with 4.4.5.2, what is the distance that an electronic sign can be from the physical distance of the business?
It does not give a specific distance. And I looked through to figure out if there were any previous administrative interpretations as to what that was defined as, and I could not find one. So
I got the impression that was in the window of the business, and it turned out that the business is some distance away, at least, 200 feet or so?
yeah, in that case, because it's kind of a group of space, we kind of just counted it, since the business is located within that structure, it's.
And I have a second question. Why isn't it a part of 4.4.5.4, which is a pulsating sign as well?
Mostly because, at least not that staff had seen, it's not really giving motion. We get into that a lot with like the pulsating signs have been, again, this has not been necessarily defined in our code or defined through an administrative interpretation, but handed down to me by the way it was explained to me that, yeah, movement, quick changes in color. In our reader board section, it's every 10 seconds. Like if it changes less often than every 10 seconds, like it has to be 10 plus seconds an image has to be up, then that would make it moving, pulsating, kind of meets that definition.
Kind of depend on how fast you punch the touch screen then.
Right, and so I'm assuming it's one of those things that we kind of get difference that if it were, if somebody's having to stand up there and interact with it, it itself, as an interactive display, so to speak, staff can definitely see the utility of, and we don't necessarily think it's, distracting to a motorist or anything along those lines. But at the same time, with the way video technology has expanded, what we were trying to prevent is somebody from putting a 10 by 10 video board up inside a window that would be basically kind of unregulated. Yeah. And so that's the difficulty we had and why staff took a bit of a conservative interpretation through the ordinance on that.
Okay. Other questions from the board to the city?
Yeah, I have one for the city.
Brandon?
So the vinyl application around there in and of itself falls within all acceptable sign parameters. It's the fact that the city has deemed that it's an electronic reader board, which by code at this point says has to be part of a freestanding sign, is the city's issue.
That's correct.
Not the size, where it is, or anything like that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Other questions from the board to the city?
Are the other signs, electronic signs on Lawrence Street, compliant with?
I'm trying to think what other electronic signs.
The other real estate companies farther up on the other side of the street, there are two. And there's quite a number of electronic signs on. And I just want to know if they are compliant as well, or out of compliance.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm trying to think where, I mean, if, essentially, if it were treated kind of the same way as this, yeah, we would just have, without knowing off the top of my head which ones they were, I'm not sure I could speak to that immediately.
Well, the ones in Caldwell Banker, is that it?
Those are still images,
Okay.
yes,
So, all right, so they're different than this sign?
correct. Those aren't, yeah, I don't believe, yeah, those are,
They're electronic though, because they're illuminated from the back.
so in this case, we're defining different illuminated versus electronic. Electronic meaning a changeable, I guess that's part of it that, yeah, we didn't go into, is that the face of it can be changed by digital means as opposed to changing copy. So we really don't have anything, I don't believe that would speak to necessarily, yeah, the illumination of it in that sense.
What about the sign, the marquee on the Center for the Arts, or the theater over here?
That was approved.
Yeah, I believe that received a variance.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, good question, yes.
Is this the first, Ryan, is this the first of this kind of sign that you have, or the staff has looked at?
It's the first one that,
Interactive?
the first interactive one that we've dealt with in my 2.5 years here. Now, I can't say that, you know, every retail establishment up and down, say, Whiskey Road or something doesn't have one. You know, it's just, if there is one, we haven't noticed it or received a call on it.
Should, and maybe this is a question for another time, but if the ordinance doesn't specifically address this, and this is a new, brand-new way of interacting with that company, say, should this not be part of the ordinance or be considered amending the ordinance to cover this issue?
So I guess those are kind of the options for the board, is if you, that is one of the questions as to whether the sign code and zoning ordinance is actually covering this. And then if it were not, it would essentially, this would kind of set precedent as something being not covered. And then it would then be, I guess, something that either could be directed to the planning commission to start reviewing as something that may need to be addressed in the sign code.
I think Bud is making an excellent point. If you wish to, if the board wish to direct the planning commission to start addressing this as an issue, it should better define this type of sign, because number one, not many people are going to stand out in 100+ degree weather and read standard writing on a sign that you have to interact with. And then two, in terms of the distance and the method of display can be improved. It's a lot of reading for a hot day.
Question from the city again. How, is the city's opinion that this sign is visible outside of your immediate interaction with the window? In other words, if I were at the sandwich board, which is in our picture there, or even out to the street, would I be able to see the customer's interaction with the window? In other words, is it a sign to me broadcast
Right.
to an area versus a personal interaction that's in an immediate space?
Right. And this was.
So for me, that's where I'm wrestling with the sign definition.
Right, in a lot of cases, it's not necessarily, the sign ordinance specifically says whether it's visible from a right-of-way. In a lot of cases, we do.
Well, the vinyl part's going to be visible.
Right.
I mean, all the interaction to the screen and all that, does that become immediately visible from this right-of-way and
Yeah,
all
so
that?
you can see it from the right-of-way. Now, whether it's
Legible.
I was going to say, yeah, effectively legible from the right-of-way, which is something that we kind of use as a test often for some signage as well. You know, it's not necessarily just directed to try to distract a motorist or something along those lines. At least this particular one is not. We have received calls on some that people have intended to do such things, put large video boards in windows along, say, Whiskey Road, to bypass the sign ordinance, and we've used kind of the same interpretation for those cases.
Yeah, I would certainly have a problem with as you said, an 8x10 video screen, you know, clearly projecting images and stuff out through the window. That's a no-brainer sign, electronic sign deal. But I guess you answered my question. The city's interpretation is that it is or is not visible outside of the individual interaction at the window in terms of it being a sign.
Yeah, and while the text on there currently, at least that staff has ever interacted with, is not, I guess, would not be legible to a motorist, it would at least be visible to from the right of way.
Is it, because I didn't interact with it, is it projecting images and colors and things of that nature, or is it literally just a menu where you're pulling up? It could be questions for the,
Yeah, so it'd probably be a good question for the applicant. When staff has interacted with it, it's very similar to, like, I guess, like an MLS listing. It'll have a photo of a property and some information on that, and you can kind of click for more information for different things. So, yeah, it's more like an interactive, computer monitor.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question for the city. How does the city view if there were television screens that were within sightline, if you will? There's some businesses downtown that have, not for the benefit of a passerby, but somebody within the business or even, you know, where you can see the television from. That's not the intended use of it. Is there any sort of restriction on that being open or
It's
interpreted?
the way we've interpreted that. So I guess, you know, it's different from like the sports bar or something like that would have a television. Is that it's not really it's not directed commercial speech toward that particular business.
Right.
And that's where we generally differentiate about what is a sign and what is not a sign. We do that a lot with, same way with art, about, you know, like a mural, like when people ask us, you know, can we put a mural on a building, then we look at the difference between like what the content, is there commercial speech in that mural? And then if not, then it's not a sign, and then it doesn't fall under size restrictions and different things like that. So similar to this, it would be the speech that's displayed. You know, if you had just a TV in there and it was I don't know, if you just had the evening news on and there whatever a channel like constantly, I'm not sure that wouldn't be a sign.
But a strategically placed TV that was in, you know, sight line of a passerby that just so happened to have a screensaver that just so happened to promote that business, would it then be interpreted? It's
Right, again, we kind of use the like, I guess, a legibility, kind of reasonable legibility factor, if it's and it's not cut and dry, whether it's trying to essentially draw attention to the business in that way, or is it more of a display, kind of similar to a window display would be. And I think it was the fact that this one was actually up against the window and you could interact with it from the window that kind of, at least for us, pushed it into the realm of, further into the realm of being a sign.
Thank you.
If we grant this appeal, what are the repercussions for the ordinance itself?
So the repercussions are, you probably would want to, well, one thing is if it were not a sign, so I guess here's some more options. If it were not a sign, you were just to say it is not a sign, then I think that kind of opens us up to people putting larger video boards that may take up a whole window or something along those lines, and be able to do that and not consider it a sign. That's, you know, that's like the extreme case, but we have had questions asked about that sort of thing. Now, if it were not, if you were to say it were, you know, a sign, but not an electronic sign as, again, the electronic sign is not specifically defined in the zoning ordinance, but if it does not meet the electronic sign that is intended by the zoning ordinance, then we would still essentially consider it a sign, and it would be subject to the dimensions thereof, and so it would be kind of size limiting and that sort of thing in that way. But essentially you could have other similar things that would be, and we would have to probably come up, you know, refer to the planning commission to maybe come up with some additional thoughts on that if it were, you know, to try to prevent, I guess, yeah, like scrolling, pulsating, those sort of things that may be kind of a distraction, which is primarily what our reader board ordinances are geared toward, is that it allows you to change copy. It recognizes that you should be able to change copy on your sign with ease with modern technology, but it should not be in such a way that it would be a distraction.
Would it be prudent for the applicant to apply for a variance or a special exception, seeing that would be isolating this one particular situation and not creating a slippery slope for other?
That's a possibility. That is an avenue.
Did she apply for a variance?
Sorry.
Did the applicant
No.
apply for a variance?
No, we presented a couple options, one being the variance and one being an appeal. Kind of the appeal, I guess, is kind of the, I guess, where we are now. And, you know, why, I'm not sure, but yeah, those are the two avenues that you could essentially take, as an appeal or a variance.
Do we have further questions from the board to the city?
The only other thing that's bothering me is that this sign, if you're driving down Lawrence Street, you're not going to notice this sign any more than any other sign that you might sign, poster, whatever, in the window. Until you park and walk up to it, you can't tell whether it is like what you see at Coldwell Banker, or Maybaum, or the people next door. And based on what a sign is, the last part of the sentence says traveling along a public street right-of-way. Now, if you're walking along a sidewalk, that's not a street. Maybe it's within the right-of-way, but that's not a street. That's what I'm having a problem with. It's foot traffic that's going to see that.
That's right.
Not someone in their automobile, unless they're very sharp and know what an interactive sign is. But I dare say the average person is not going to distinguish one or the other. So that's the dilemma I have right now, is the definition as it applies to that. And it's really not, the definition is not specific, in my opinion, not specific enough to cover this particular application.
And not to speak for the appellant, but I think that's kind of the case that they tried to make as well in some portion of theirs, that it acts less of a sign and more as a digital directory as opposed to a sign, and without really any differentiation in the code for that sort of thing. Again, staff admittedly erred conservatively.
I understand.
Any further questions from the board to the city? Thanks, Mike. Do we have a representative from United Real Estate?
Good evening. I'm Brenda Daly with United Real Estate, and this is Jeff Seiler. He's the gentleman that has installed my interactive window. Our interactive window is a display to the general public of the MLS data. Instead of putting all types of pieces of paper along our little window, we would do an interactive window. And Jeff had come up with where you can touch the film and they can look through the MLS to find houses that are for sale in Aiken County.
Do you consider that your display successful?
Do I believe it's successful? I believe people do use it, yes. I believe that people do see it and notice that we are a real estate company, and we sit inside the building, so you have to walk down the corridor to come to our office. So it helps draw the traffic flow down our corridor, yes.
Question from the board?
Yeah, I have a question. Do you consider this an individual interaction with the interactive feature of it and its ability to be viewed, or more of a mass? Maybe that's a question for Mr. Seiler.
I don't,
I think it's more of an individual one, Brendan, because it's just like if you're searching on MLS and you pull up and you're looking for particular kind of houses, this gives people, and there's no rapid motion to the images on there. You click, type in so many bedrooms, so many square feet, whatever, and then you get the searches and you can scroll through that.
Would you consider it effective for anyone other than the person at the window in terms of gaining any sorts of information, or?
No, because you really can't. I mean, it's kind of like holding this up from a couple of feet away. You really can't see what's on there.
Okay.
Do you plan to make that larger, or, because that was the problem. I took an individual down and they said, I'm not gonna stand there and read that, it's too small.
They can be larger. We were looking at the window and doing something that would be, a reasonable size on that window without being,
Do you
over
plan to enlarge it or make it more user-friendly?
are you talking about and making the font larger?
Yes.
You can do that, but it's like an iPad where you can just touch the screen and it'll get larger.
Okay.
Yes, so,
We could do that. I mean, you can also, since it's interactive, obviously the print on there is pretty small. You can, just like with your iPad, you can do this to expand in on it.
Okay.
And one thing that's nice about, we've got kiosk software installed on there, so you don't have to worry about somebody navigating to some website that you wouldn't want to be down there. It's locked down to show the content that we want to show on there. We could zoom in on it so all of the print is larger. But you do have you can stretch it and then it will reset itself, so it's not really zoomed in on one little box.
Thank you.
I do have one additional question. Is the window otherwise scrolling or performing any other function other than when an individual is there interacting with it? Do you have it on any sort of repeat?
Excuse me.
There's a slideshow, Brendan, that I've got set real slow to change from picture to picture. There's not a whole lot of attention-grabbing motion to it. Most everything on there, the only time it will move or do anything is when you manually go up and touch the window.
Okay, because for me, that's where we're starting to trend towards being signage versus being an individual interactive device like an ATM or something like that. So it's kind of a fine line for me on how it's being used and what's going on with it when it's not being individually interacted with. So I was just curious what was going on when there was nobody at the window, so.
It will reset itself after 10 minutes to just go back to the page that we've selected on Brenda's webpage. We've got her Facebook feed on there that again is just static post. When she posts something new, it shows up on there.
Okay.
So you've got, rather than the signs that are, printed paper that are stuck on the windows, you've got some refreshing and keep the content.
Okay. Thank you.
So there's no flashing and stuff like that? It's
No.
okay.
But when it's not used for a while, it doesn't go dark like my computer screen.
No, we've got the, like, screensavers and things like that turned off. So you've got the constancy of the display.
But it changes.
It changes as she updates content, which is,
So if I were to go by there right now and nobody had touched that screen for 30 minutes, there would be the last picture that was up there 30 minutes ago,
it would reset itself to the default screen.
which is her picture.
Correct.
And it would stay like that.
Well, it's her MLS page.
Right, but it would stay like that until someone came up and touched it,
Correct.
so it wouldn't be changing.
No.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Jeff, how many other markets have you applied similar technology in? Anything outside of Aiken in this fashion?
Well, I'm trying to market it in the area. I've been marketing over into Evans, up into Lexington and Columbia, and just trying to get the word out on what we're doing.
Sure. Do you have a display similar to this in Evans right now?
Not yet.
Okay. How big do they have the potential to be? Is this sort of a standard size? Is there room to get larger?
The largest interactive film that you can get, Karen, is a 105-inch diagonal, which is basically 6 feet by 8 feet. Most of them I'm promoting for people. I mean, that one's got it's a 50-inch diagonal. I think for something that people are going to walk up to, that's plenty big because it would be kind of overbearing. I think 30 to 50 is going to be like the sweet spot. It would have to be a heck of a window to really be able to take something that large.
Right.
But the smallest one's about laptop size. The 105 is the largest one.
Have you installed a 105-inch at any point and
No.
not? Okay.
I'd be tickled to do it, but I haven't. I tell everybody when I'm giving them quotes or showing, like I've got a demo unit that's got a 32-inch film in it, just so people can see something that's pretty much full size. I say 30 to 50 is plenty. Because you're going to want to put some graphic around it because people aren't used to, hey, I can walk up and touch the window and they won't fuss at me.
Right.
So give it a little idea of educating them to come up here and you can look for houses or look for whatever.
Right. Thank you.
That type of thing, though, is your type of signage, regardless of size, it caters more to the foot traffic, does it not? Where you could walk up. You could put your sign in a restaurant window, could you not? And they could go through the whole menu as opposed to having a menu posted. They could go through the menu, could they not?
Correct.
Okay. And there's also would advertise the business itself, like a Malia's or something like, a restaurant like that. Right now, it's advertising, I say advertising, it's letting folks know that United Realty is in that building somewhere.
Correct.
So they'll interact with the sign or the screen, and then if they like something, you could walk down the hall and see if you're in, is that right?
Do we have further questions from the board to Brenda or Jeff? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have others to speak to the administrative interpretation? Final call, others to speak to the administrative interpretation. Seeing, hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion so we can enter a period of discussion.
Mr. Chairman, then, I move that we approve this appeal of the planning director's interpretation on this display.
Do we have a second?
For the sake of discussion, I'll second. Second.
It's been properly moved and second that we approve the planning director's interpretation. Do we have any discussion?
Okay, just so I'm sure, the motion is to approve the planning director's interpretation to deny the...
Yes.
That's the motion.
That's the motion, that's the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering if we
Yeah.
needed to add some language conditional on setting some parameters that we alluded to for the planning committee, or I'm sorry.
For the sake of the motion, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Because I agree with the appeal. My concern is setting a precedent, because I think with the way technology is expanding, I think depending on the price point, someone who has the interactive display, a competitor would say, well, I'm going to get that too, but mine's going to be bigger.
Right.
And I think that there's a potential for that to be a major consideration for the downtown core to stay aesthetically pleasing, still very cutting edge, but I'm wondering if we have to have language added at some point to define, yes, this is not a sign in my opinion, however, what is an electronic billboard / kiosk to keep up with the times?
You would be in order to add broad guidelines to the planning group to do exactly what you're suggesting.
Then would you amend the motion then, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Based on what
Karen, you would have to
is
make an
saying?
amendment to the motion, then we vote on the amended motion.
Okay, so I would like to make an amendment to the motion to include language that further defines electronic signage under the current ordinance, to be, I guess, further explored by the,
Right, so there's, Mr. Chairman, if I may help, so there's a couple ways we could do this. One is to state, so is my understanding that the motion and second is to uphold the appeal, correct? So that would be in favor of not considering it applicable under the standards. It would also, it'd be helpful, yeah, so one is to be able to kind of refer, but probably more helpful to staff at this point is to understand at what point to the board it ceased to become a sign under the ordinance. And for instance, one thing that Mr. Coward has referred to consistently is the legibility factor, essentially, about how it's not reasonably legible from a right-of-way and therefore directed toward pedestrians. And that's kind of enough to, I guess, that sort of guidance would be enough to give staff directive as to how to interpret this moving forward.
Yeah, I concur. Having been in the sign business a while back, I mean, the definition of a sign to me is trying to communicate something to the mass, okay? Something that's individually interactive to me does not meet the threshold of a sign. So that's why I'm on board at this point with the appeal. But you get to a certain size, scope, and it becomes much less individual and much more broadcasting to the public. That's where I think further fleshing out under, it's not so much the electronic definition as it is, whatever means it is it an individual interactive device, or is it for mass appeal or mass broadcast of messaging? That's kind of where the direction I would send the planning department.
perhaps the metric is the 50-inch diagonal that Jeff alluded to, if that's, the metric beyond that.
Size could certainly be one of the parameters to keep it in an individual type interaction, but there's probably more parameters that need to be boxed in to where no matter what the type of signage, is it meant for an individual interaction at the face of the property, or is it meant to broadcast messaging?
But that would be the job, would it not, of the planning commission if this is where this is going?
Right, so I guess what we would need from this board, I guess, is, again, more the rationale as to why you didn't feel it met, if you were to move forward with the vote as currently, why it did not satisfy that. And then, yeah, then we could bring that information to the planning commission and say, essentially, we now have this as a base, it kind of sets a baseline as to how staff would interpret it moving forward, and then it'd be up to the planning commission at that point as to whether they want to take that on as something that they would desire to add additional clarification to actually in the ordinance as opposed to by precedent.
Paula, can you give the board what we are to consider voting on?
I have a question, if I may. If we, Ryan, if we uphold your interpretation, can the United Real Estate come back and apply for a variance?
Yes, it wouldn't preclude them from applying for a variance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the board is considering an appeal of the planning director's interpretation of the display in question as an electronic sign not permitted under the zoning ordinance. So the board shall affirm, modify, or reverse the planning director's decision. Is that kind of what you're looking at?
Now, does the board agree?
On the table, I believe, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No.
Is we had a motion and a second to uphold the appeal, which would be reversing the planning director's decision.
Right.
And then Karen asked for an amendment to,
Right, and so the amendment never quite flushed out and is sitting there right now, yes.
Let's clarify. It's to uphold the appeal so that they would be able to keep the sign if the majority of the people voted yes.
Correct.
We haven't voted yet.
No, I'm just saying
That's
if.
the motion, as I understand it.
The amendment, though, I don't want to amend without, I don't want to take that away from the motion. I'm wondering if the amendment needs to be a separate issue.
It should be a separate.
Right.
Yeah.
So we want to
Now that
define
we
that.
heard it again, it should be separate.
Right.
Right. So would you hold and then remake your motion
So
after the vote?
I'm making an amendment?
After the, no, after the vote.
Motion.
After the vote, it'll be a motion rather than an amendment.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you do the motion again?
Do the motion again, Baldwin.
So it was my notes here, I have a motion from Board Member Turner, seconded by Board Member Coward, to affirm the appeal in this particular case.
Yeah. Is that satisfactory with the board, that is the motion?
So we vote aye, we're voting for the appeal.
Right. Now, those in favor of the motion, show by raise of.
Can we
Wait a minute.
ask a question before? Okay.
Question.
So this is just an appeal for this one sign?
Yes.
So the people down the street are not going to be able to, we're not
Well, they-
saying that this is electronic or not electronic. This is just this one particular one.
Right.
Because my concern is people down the street might put up an interactive sign, and they may have fireworks, going off in their sign, and colored balls moving across the
You just
screen.
enhanced that job.
Yeah, that will get to the amendment, I think,
Yeah.
that we're going to make
Yeah.
to try to prevent
To
that.
clarify the language for the future.
I'm very concerned this is going to set a dangerous precedent for whatever comes down the road. And I went down the street last night and it's very tasteful. It's not garish at all. But that doesn't mean something in the future can be.
That's where the amendment, the
Okay,
motion will come
I'm
in,
just,
yeah.
but right now, Mr. Chair, we are affirming the planning director's decision that this is an electronic sign, which is
No,
not.
you're backwards now.
Is it backward? Am I backwards
You're
on that?
backwards, is it the reverse?
You're approving this sign
We're approving the sign.
Right.
if you
Okay.
vote in favor of it.
Right.
Now, you seconded that motion. Are you so good with your
I'm
second?
fine with
Okay.
that. I'm fine with
But
it.
he just seconded it for the
He
place of
said for
discussion.
discussion purposes only. Now, those in favor of the motion, show by raise of the right hand. That the motion is carried unanimously. Now, Karen, if you can state it correctly.
I'm going to try. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion for an amendment to,
Just a motion.
excuse me, a motion, strike the amendment, to address the parameters for future interactive signage and electronic billboards to be put in front of the planning committee for any future application, so that we have a little better parameter to fall under the sign ordinance for the city.
More specific parameters.
More specific, much more specific.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Bud second. Is that for discussion or?
I'll second. Period.
It's been properly moved and second that, for the motion. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion, show by raising the right hand. Those opposed, same sign. The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Nancy?
Let's say that she goes out of business and she leaves that sign there. Is this going to run, you know, with the new owner, which could be a totally different,
Unless you're in the real
Business?
estate business.
but that could be programmed to have something different in
Yeah,
there?
Mr. Chairman, so the staff would interpret this as if they were to use it in a similar way. So it does not, if another business, for instance, inherited for some reason or bought out with the sign or I guess the non-sign, the window display directory, and put in, programmed their own window display directory that doesn't have
That's the gist of it.
flashing graphics or different things like that,
I'm
the way
just
I understand
concerned
it.
about inappropriate photographs. Not that they would do that, but that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
Right, so it would have to be used, the way I understand the appeal to have worked and the rationale of the board, that it would have to be used in a similar way.
And same thing when interpreting, who's ever going to do the interpretation of this, I don't want it to be a blanket interpretation that they can put whatever.
Then are you suggesting that this run with this business?
That's what I would like to see. But,
That's
you know,
a
suppose somebody
variance.
puts a bar in there and they want a Hooters bar. And they want Hooters up there.
But I was thinking that's what Karen's, her, you know, thing is for, is to go back and look at it so we have more specific stuff from
And
now
that's
on.
the type of thing I want in the more
Right.
specific
okay.
stuff.
Right. Does staff have enough information now to the gist of the motion?
We have direction.
Thank you. I call your attention to application 19-92007, a special exception permit for a self-service storage facility, and this is at 519 Silver Bluff Road. To the city, has this been properly posted?
It has.
Any inquiries that you wish to share with the board?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to recuse myself because of conflict of interest. The applicant is a client of my business.
Okay, thanks, Bud.
No additional inquiries other than those received as comments attached to your packet.
Presentation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the subject property is at the southeast corner of Silver Bluff Road and Hamilton Drive. It's about 3 acres. The property is currently in Aiken County, but is in the process of an annexation request, which would zone the property general business. It has a positive recommendation from the Planning Commission and is moving on to the City Council. The applicant has applied for a special exception, which is possible under the GB zone district, so the general business zone district, which is under consideration currently to operate a self-storage district in accordance with, a self-storage facility in accordance with the zoning ordinance. The subject property is currently vacant, unimproved. Used to have a house on it, kind of a small ranch style house, up until a couple years ago. What is being proposed is an approximate 125 foot by 350 foot completely enclosed facility. It is essentially oriented along with the lot, so kind of a rectangle long ways, with the skinny side toward Silver Bluff and the long side toward Hamilton, if you will. It would be, at least as included in the concept drawing that is in your packet and up on the screen, would be access from Hamilton Drive, somewhat buffered from the property to the east by likely where the retention would go associated with it, the project. It would be multiple stories, enclosed with a maximum of approximately 112,500 square feet, again on multiple levels. The graphic depiction you have in your up on the screen and in your agenda packet is a similar facility, I believe in another location, that is a 3-story facility, which I believe is essentially what this would be. The applicant can clarify. But again, you have, it's something that would be permitted as part of a special exception if it meets to the board's satisfaction the 11 special exception criteria that are responded to by the applicant and staff in the enclosed memo and packet. Staff would be able to answer any questions you might have.
Just for my own information, you said this is being considered for annexation into the city?
That's correct.
How far does it just go to Hamilton Drive, or does it extend beyond that? Because I saw many mobiles there, and I know mobiles are not allowed in the city of Aiken, so does the request for annexation go beyond that?
It's the parcel. I mean, it's a parcel here depicted on the map. So it's the 3-acre parcel that fronts Silver Bluff and
Just that 3 acres?
Just that 3
Okay,
acres. That's right. There would still be a property. So so if you're heading, I guess, south on Silver Bluff. Just to kind of give you reference, the Floyd and Green Jewelry Company is outside the city limits. The adjacent vacant lot, which it currently has a site plan under process for a fast food restaurant, is in the city limits. This would be the next parcel. It's currently outside the city limits under annexation, non-annexation process currently. The next parcel, which is an office for Mixon Roofing, I believe, is outside the city limits, and then South Aiken Baptist is the next property, which is in the city. So it's a bit of a sawtooth on that side, but again, these are a couple parcels that this and the Dairy Queen parcel that have annexation requests along with development concepts recently.
What's the purpose of annexing it and zoning it general business?
Of annexing and zoning it. So the city has an annexation policy that if a property were to sell and it has water and sewer access, which this property does, then it is required to annex for the new owner to get water and sewer to a new development. So city policy essentially requires the annexation as part of development of the property.
I remember Floyd and Green is outside the city, and there was an issue some years ago about the sign that's on their property, and it's allowed because they're in the county and they can have that big sign, which is not allowed inside the city.
Correct, the billboard, yes.
The
billboard's
billboard.
yes, that's right.
But if they sell, they become part of the city?
Yes, so if they were to sell, they would to a new owner, and the new owner, yes, yes. Yes, it would be required to be annexed into the city.
Questions to the city from the board?
What's the, I know it says it in here, the height is going to be,
I'm trying to remember the specific height, but the height maximum in the general business district is 50 feet, which is roughly 3 stories of commercial construction typically.
The size of the letter on the fire department's truck.
I understand that with modern sprinkler technology, that is not as much of a factor, but that's often referenced as, yeah, as still accessible by ladder.
and that's the height that was changed when the Holly Inn downtown wanted to put 3 stories?
That was for the downtown business zone district specifically. So it's not the general business district, it's the downtown business district, and that was raised 5 feet to 55 feet.
All right, so downtown is how high?
55,
And this is going to be,
maximum 50.
okay, thank you.
So this explains why you need an encroachment permit from the Department of DOT for the entrance off of Hamilton Lake.
Correct, so yeah, Silver Bluff and Hamilton are both DOT rights of way, or, and so, yeah, the
DOT control.
DOT, yeah, reviews encroachment permits.
Okay. Other questions to the city from the board?
Did anyone call the city, any concerns or anything like that?
We didn't have any concerns other than those, or any comments at all, other than those that were included in writing in here.
The one negative that was across Silver Bluff from the doctor?
Yes.
Thanks, Brian. Do we have a representative from the storage department, the storage development?
Brad Brody, 230 Colleton Avenue Southeast. Answer any questions.
Yeah, Mr. Brody, you received a copy of the staff report. Do you wish to embellish that or just respond to any questions from the board?
I'll correct the height is probably will not be any more than 35 feet. And to my understanding, Hamilton is a county.
So I was just, yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was just checking on that. Yes, I believe Hamilton is county.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah. Questions to Mr. Brody from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I had a question.
Karen?
Mr. Brody, I appreciated the inclusion of the information about the impact of traffic and storage facilities. One of the things that was pointed out in the article is regarding other elements to the business, specifically truck rental, mailboxes, and shipping supplies. So I was just seeking some clarification if that was in the business plan for this particular application.
No truck rentals. You know, inside the office, we sell boxes and locks, you know, primarily for our tenants.
Mostly for storage purposes versus shipping, for example?
Correct, exactly, right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brody? Yeah. How much, I guess, what is going to be the side setback for the building? Is it going to have access to both sides of the building? And what would be the amount of space between the building and the property line?
Okay. It will not have access on both sides. The side facing Hamilton will be the primary access side, which will have a specific loading area automatic opening doors as you walk in the building. I think there will be, one of the elevators will be right there, and then there'll be another elevator at maybe towards the rear location.
Okay.
But we'll have access on that side. The office corner will, as you can see in the picture that was displayed, half of it is facing Silver Bluff, the other half is facing Hamilton. And there will, at the end of the building, there will probably be another entrance on that end there. But the side of the building that's facing the roofing company will have no entrance
Right.
at all.
And how close to the property line is that going to be?
Well, I think on that side, the setback may be 10 feet.
10 feet,
I mean,
okay.
obviously Silver Bluff, I think the setback is 50 feet, maybe on Hamilton, it's 40 feet on that side.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brody, is this the actual rendering of what it's going to look like?
Pretty much, yeah. We just finished that project down in Apopka, Florida. We've got that same design on the drawing board on another project. And this will be the first introduction of this product in the CSRA, a multi-story, fully climatized, it's obviously sprinkled, for fire code issues, elevators, high security, and will be managed by an outside third-party management company that specializes in self-storage.
If this is the layout or the proposed, close to the proposed design, where's Silver
Right,
Bluff and
Hamilton is
Hamilton?
this way, Silver Bluff is just out the corner.
Okay,
The loading area you'll see about middle ways down,
right,
it will be the primary loading area.
and off Hamilton.
Correct, yes.
So Silver Bluff is where that car is out front? No?
Well, Silver Bluff is this way.
What
Where the
street
truck-
is that where the car is, the white car?
The entrance is off of Hamilton. So if you assume that you came in that entrance, see where the entrance is drawn, it would be more up towards the office area there. And we will probably have an exit coming off of Hamilton also.
The two people that are standing out front there,
Right.
what street is that?
They're facing Hamilton.
They're facing Hamilton. So where's Silver Bluff?
In front.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, if I'm driving southbound on Silver Bluff, similar to this picture of the lot I have here,
Am I going towards Floyd and
if
Green
you're,
right
if you're
now?
heading,
No.
if you've left Floyd and Green and you're heading south toward Woodside,
Yeah.
Okay.
this view here,
Is it on the left?
it's on the left.
On the left.
This front part right here?
That would essentially be oriented toward the corner of Hamilton and Silver Bluff.
The white car would be facing going down Hamilton.
Yeah, that's
Does that help you?
correct. Yeah.
All right, so where's the Silver Bluff view?
It's right on the corner, so the right half of the building is parallel to Silver Bluff.
So that it looks like you'd be entering, there's some fencing and stuff there that would be on Silver Bluff.
You're not entering off Silver Bluff, correct?
So maybe I can help here, Mr. Chairman, if you will. So this rendering is of not necessarily of the site layout, but the building. The site layout is what is kind of shown here. So the site layout, I believe that's shown here shows kind of more of a two parking lot kind of situation, which is, I think, throwing you off
Go
there
to that other drawing then?
to the overhead.
Yeah, okay. Which street is which on there?
So the skinny.
Short part
The skinny
is-
side is Silver Bluff.
Okay,
The longer side is along Hamilton.
okay. I thought Hamilton was on the other side. Okay, I got it now.
one more question.
Go ahead.
With this application, there's really no need for any sort of exterior fencing because everything is within the building, correct? Short of fencing around the retention
You know,
pond?
if we saw the need for fencing, we obviously want to have the property as secure as possible. If we had any fencing, it would be, can I walk over here and just kind of give you
You bet.
a corner here? Obviously, here's the office area here, and the parking. In order for a new tenant to enter our property, we don't want to have to go in through a gate, through a security gate. If we had any kind of fencing, it would be here, you know, with a keypad, and we would have ornamental fencing down this area here, and say enclose this area here with fencing. And if this were an exit here, then we would have an exit gate here also. Anybody entering the office would not have to go through the gate or any type of security at all. There would not be any fencing, you know, facing Silver Bluff at all.
Okay.
You don't anticipate any problem with the parking for the gym, for the church along Hampton?
Not really. I mean, you know, I've driven back, you know, down there, and I see their access road in the rear back there. You know, that would be where our detention pond area is, in the rear back there. So, and I mean, obviously, we're complying with any landscaping guidelines, you know, the city might have also. So,
But all this is, excuse me, all this is contingent upon the city accepting this property into the city, is that correct?
well, if the city did not want this facility within the city, then we would stay in the county
Okay, okay,
and build it.
gotcha.
And then you wouldn't be under any of these restrictions, having it be a
It
walk-up
would
business.
not be, and you wouldn't get this tremendous tax base offering also.
Can I ask,
You go ahead, Nancy.
I don't know if I should be asking Mr. Brody or Mr. Bland, where is Dr.
Oh,
so-and-so's office in relationship to the front of his building?
Are you referring to the roofing company? It's
No, the person that wrote the letter.
That's the,
the roofing company.
I thought it was a doctor.
they're leasing it.
Well, they own the property, and they lease it to a roofing company.
There we go.
Oh, that's why I couldn't find the doctor's.
Okay.
Right.
that's his Exhibit E. Yeah.
On this site plan, how is the space behind the building going to be used?
It's going to be mostly taken up by the detention pond.
I'm sorry, the retention pond, you
Yeah,
said?
yes, you
Okay,
know, we're creating a large impervious area there, so therefore,
okay.
you know, we'll have to have our own pond back there. And I also mentioned too, on the back end, I will probably take the asphalt all the way around, and I'll have an entrance on the back end also. You know, we've got stairwells also that have to be on, you know, adjacent corners also. So on that back far corner is where we would place one of the stairwells. And then up towards the front, we would have another stairwell there. So from that stairwell, there has to be an exit door, you know, with either a sidewalk or asphalt for them to exit onto.
I have a question, Mr. Brody, just as a matter of information for the city. So you are the developer, the construction agent, both? What exactly?
All of the above.
Okay. And you have completed approximately how many of these types of projects? Maybe not the specific one, but storage units, I guess, is your...
I've been doing this for 25 years, and this is all that I do.
Okay,
Strictly
store.
self-storage in a four-state area.
And again, just as a matter of information, because I'm curious, is it, of your opinion, obviously you're willing to undergo, obviously, the expense and the risk of this development. that Aiken needs more storage or needs this type of storage? Or a little bit of both?
Kind of both.
Okay.
You know, I built and owned the storage facility next to Tractor Supply. Richland Avenue Storage, which is Prime Storage now. I built and owned that. You know, I finished Breezy Hill Storage
Yeah,
for Venice
Vanderbilt.
Academy, for Well and Wyatt, you know, last year. So, I mean, I do this all over, and this is what we do.
Okay.
This is, you know, if you think of that old stereotypical self-storage facility of chain link fence and gravel driveways and just a bunch of roll-up doors everywhere, that, you might call that first generation of self-storage that came along, you know, 45 years ago. We're probably this is probably the 5th generation of self-storage now. You know, the big metropolitan areas have just kind of run out of land for self-storage. The need is there. But now the big developers are just buying less land and going up with it. And the acceptance of that has been really tremendous, because there are a lot of renters, there are a lot of potential renters out there that have things that they want to store, but they would not store them in some of the facilities that exist today. And we, you know, cater to a little higher clientele, you know, with our renter base here.
Some climate control is a big factor, big
Yes.
plus too.
Well, that and security, you know, that's associated with a facility like this.
Well, I appreciate you expounding a little further, just a general interest to me and maybe to some of the other board members here. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions from the board to Mr. Brody? Thank you. Do we have others to speak to the special exception? Final call, others to speak to the special exception request? Seeing, hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion so we can enter a period of discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Judy?
I ask that we approve application number 1992007 with the following criteria or conditions. 1, approval is granted to construct an approximately 112,500 square foot multi-story self-storage facility in accordance with the submitted concept plan at 519 Silver Bluff Road, more specifically identified by tax parcel number 106160219. That approval of this special exception is contingent on annexation into the city of Aiken, the property zoned general business, and transfer or sale of property to the applicant. 3, that site and building plan should comply with applicable sections of the zoning ordinance regarding the general business district, including design standards, landscape and buffers, and access management. And that final order is to run with the land and be recorded in the Aiken County RMC office.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Karen second. It's been properly moved and second that we approve the request. Do we have any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, looking at all the criteria, I feel they have met every single one of them without doubt, and I feel like it will be an asset to the property.
I'd like some other board members to say whether they think this would be a problem if someone else were coming before us, that this isn't a walk-up business. And general business is supposed to be a walk-up. I just don't want it to set a precedent that... So we're kind of going, if we vote in favor of this, we're kind of going against the city's definition.
But it says it's being permitted by special exception into the GP area.
So, no problem with other people wanting precedent.
They had a lot of positive comments from other businesses in the area.
Yeah, I saw that.
Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion show by raise of the right hand. The motion is carried unanimously with Mr. Cowan recuse himself, yeah. Okay. That covers the item, all the items on the agenda. The chair would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Before we do that, I'm
Okay.
so glad that you are back with us and looking so good, so welcome back.
Thank you, thank you.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second? That is not a vote on motion, we stand adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, I will not be at the next meeting.